So you're thinking about buying a rental property, which is cool, neato cabito. The problem behind it is social media in general has made it seem like owning rental properties is the simplest and best point or possibility to be able to gain wealth. And there's some truth there. If you're keeping a home for 7 years, typically it can start outpacing the stocks after some point, as long as your area is good and a whole bunch of other different specific pieces of it. But I want to spend a moment just talking about real estate investing is wildly complicated. And there are three huge variables, even if we didn't have to put numbers on it. Here are some really good things just to be aware of if you're thinking about buying a rental property. One big part of it is going to be the age of the property or how much maintenance is required in general. 100%, you could have a property from the 1900s that's a duplex that, as long as it's been managed really well, they've kept water away from the foundation, everything like that, they've replaced all the guts in it at some point, could be a really easy property to be able to maintain. The problem, though, is that it's just much more likely that it's going to have more problems than a standard home from 2021 or 2022. This is a huge variable that I don't think people calculate into the cost of running a rental property. The yearly maintenance on it. You can go look at a property and see if it has roof that needs to be replaced in the next 5 to 10 years, if the plumbing needs to be replaced in the next 5 years, and you can put those numbers up and even put it out to a 10-year span, saying over the next 10 years, we've got $15,000 in projects. And then you can calculate that into the rent that you're charging for that property. It's really essential to do this. You can use generic calculations for it and say that you can add 1% cost to it, but it's not going to work for every property, or it only works for a specific area of properties when you're doing generic computations like that. So it's just good to be aware the condition of the property is going to change your profit margins on that property over a span of time, even over a year. Even after choosing a property, figuring out a place that you can charge consistent rent and being conservative on that rent is super important. Over the next 5 to 10 years, we're seeing a huge influx in the amount of rentals that are being created here in Utah. So where single family residential is still pretty far behind, at some point rentals are going to be able to catch up because they can build hundreds of them at a time, or whatever the number really is. And so multifamily and rentals, duplexes, aren't going to be as good of an investment as they've been in the last 10 years, quite possibly. So especially at this moment in time, you need to be wildly conservative about what you can charge with rent, and you need to understand and have realistic expectations for what your cash on cash or how much money you're making off of a rental in general. Expecting to be getting a 15 or 20% yearly off of a rental, it would be really hard to do unless you find a very specific property you get a huge discount on because they're trying to sell quickly, or there's some other reasoning behind it. But there's a lot of properties that are doing 6 to 12% a year. Well, 10 to 12% is going to be super hard to find. But finding a 6% property or an 8%, something like that, I think is very doable. But then you have to ask the question as well, what does the maintenance look like on that property, and is it going to cause you problems? And there's a million other problems, but the last one I want to talk about on this video is renters. Renters are incredibly difficult, and you can vet them, you can try to make sure that they're going to be good renters, but if they choose not to pay and they just need to be evicted, you've got a 3 to 6 month process and $2,000 to $5,000 in cost to kick them out. Let's say that happens twice. Worst case scenario, absolutely, but is that going to totally sink you? Is that going to totally ruin you? These are huge variables that people don't take into account when they're trying to rent a property, is that there's going to be downtime. Renters aren't going to want to live in the property for too long. And if rents are decreasing because they're creating so many different rental units right now, at some point they're going to go somewhere else that's cheaper and nicer. And so renters in general is one of the largest reasons there's so much risk in that first 5 years, especially if you aren't able to keep it rented consistently. So yes, just the equity on the home starts becoming a huge boon in general after that 7-year mark, but you have to make it to that 7-year mark. And it's 100% good to be aware you're making money off of the rental income. If you're making more rent off of what it costs you to own that property in a month, there's profit there. You're making money off of the equity of it every year. Home values go up 2 to 7% a year typically. Some years they're down, some years they're up, but typically there's some kind of equity gain. And then 3, as you pay off that mortgage payment, you are paying down a part of the principal. So some of those costs are kind of negated. There's a lot of money that can be had in real estate investing. It just takes time. And that's the hugest thing to realize. It's not about going slow. It's about understanding what you're getting.